Hello everyone, this is part 2 video of NCERT as it is series on surface chemistry. Now those who are looking at this video, right, can also take a look at the first part because after all it's the continuation. So in part 1, right, what we did is we have covered up to the adsorption idea, the different types of adsorption, examples of adsorption, mechanism of adsorption. So all these things we have covered in the part 1. Now in the part 2 video we look at particularly the catalysis. Part 3 we will cover the colloids. So that's how we have divided the chapter. So we'll start with the catalysis. Now like it happens with most of the chemical reaction, if you look at the decomposition of potassium chloride, right? So even when we strongly heat it up to say 653 to 873 Kelvin, that range of temperature, we will see that the decomposition happens usually in a slow manner. So it will give, on decomposition, it will give potassium chloride and oxygen gas. So whereas if you add a small amount of manganese dioxide, MnO2, so if you are adding a small amount of MnO2 to this, then we will see that the reaction will suddenly speed up. So even at lower temperature range of 473 to 633, we will see that the reaction will happen at a much accelerated rate. Now this idea, right, is not just for the decomposition of potassium chloride. It happens with most of the chemical reactions. And this altering of the rate of a chemical reaction, right, by the presence of a foreign substance. So here the word foreign substance, right, is what we will later start calling as a catalyst. So majority of the chemical reaction, their rate can be enhanced by the use of this foreign substance, which we will later start calling as a catalyst. So the systematic study of the enhancement of the rate of the reactions, right, is done by Berzelius. We will not usually get questions on who was done on all these things, but he is the one who suggested the word catalyst. So initially we said foreign substance, but from now we will start calling that substance as what? Catalyst. So what is a catalyst? How do we define a catalyst? These are the substances which alter the rate of a chemical reaction and themselves remain chemically as well as quantitatively unchanged after the reaction. Means at the end of the reaction we will go and check the chemical composition of the catalyst as well as the amount of the catalyst will remain unchanged. And this particular phenomena, right, is what we will be referring as the catalysis. So in fact, remember, so we have studied this in chemical kinetics. So chemical kinetics, we talked about how a catalyst will work. We even in chemical kinetics, right, we have a mechanism or a theory which we call as the intermediate formation theory of catalysis. So here also we will talk about the theory of the catalysis. There again we will mention about this intermediate formation theory. So when you look at a catalyst, right, what is the catalyst essentially doing? It is speeding up the rate of the reaction. It means we will be able to obtain the product in a lesser amount of time. Okay. Now we also have some substances which can influence the catalyst. Like we have promoters, they will enhance the activity of the catalyst. Whereas we have poisons that will actually decrease the activity of the catalyst. Like in the Haber's process for the manufacture of ammonia, we use iron as a catalyst. Molybdenum will be added as a promoter, means it will enhance the activity of the catalyst. Same time if some carbon monoxide is present, so in the Haber's process if the carbon monoxide is present, then it will act as a poison, means it will reduce the activity of the iron catalyst. So that is the reason why we keep saying that while the Haber's process is performed, we should not have carbon monoxide within the container because it will reduce the activity of the iron catalyst. Okay, so this way we can have substances which will enhance the activity of the catalyst, we call them as promoter, and there can be substances which will decrease the activity of the catalyst, we call them as poisons. So how do we classify this catalysis? So we can generally classify it into two categories. One is homogeneous catalysis, other is the heterogeneous. Homogeneous means when we have the reactants and catalyst in the same phase. Like we'll see a lot of examples. Look at this one, the oxidation of sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide. So this is catalyzed by oxides of nitrogen. So you can see the reactants as well as the catalyst, all of them are in the gas phase. Okay, so the reactant, what are the reactants here? Sulfur dioxide, oxygen, and the catalyst, what is the catalyst here? Nitric oxide. So all of them are in the same gaseous phase. So we call it as what? Homogeneous catalysis. Even if you look at the hydrolysis of ester methyl acetate, it is catalyzed by the H plus ions coming from the acid. So from the HCl, the H plus ions released by the acid, right? They will catalyze the hydrolysis of the ester. So you see here, all of them are in solution, aqueous solution. They are in the same phase. That is the reason why we also call it as what? Homogeneous catalysis. Now just remember this, the ester hydrolysis, right? This can be another interesting question. I think we have it as a question also. One of the in-text questions, right? Why the ester hydrolysis initially will happen slow and will increase the rate after some time? Means as the reaction is proceeding, right? The rate of the ester hydrolysis will increase over a period of time. The reason is very simple. The reaction is catalyzed by what? H plus ions, which will be coming from the HCl. But look at what is one of the product. One of the product is what? Acid itself. Means from here also we will start getting H plus. So as the product is getting formed, right, we will start getting H plus, which will further catalyze the hydrolysis. That is the reason why initially, though the ester hydrolysis will happen at a slow rate, after a while it will start increasing the speed of the reaction. Why? Because one of the product formed, which is an acid, that will further supply the H plus ions, because the reaction is catalyzed by the H plus ions, right? So that will enhance the rate of the reaction. Okay, so we'll see, there can be a question based on that. Now moving on to the other examples of the homogeneous catalysis, right? We can have the hydrolysis of the sugar, that is also catalyzed by acid. So H plus ions, all of them are in the solution. Sucrose is a part of the solution. The hydrolysis of sugar will give us what? Glucose and fructose. But here we have to look at what? The reactants and the catalyst, all of them are in the same phase, which is they are in the aqueous solution phase. So that is also what? Example of the homogeneous. But here in our surface chemistry, right, our focus is not on homogeneous catalysis. Our focus is on the heterogeneous catalysis. We'll see, so from now we have seen some examples of the homogeneous catalysis, but from now, right, we will be exclusively focusing on the heterogeneous catalysis. So what is heterogeneous catalysis? The reactants and catalysts, they must be in different phases. Like we can see the oxidation of sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide in the presence of platinum. This happens in the contact process for the manufacture of sulfuric acid. This is what? Heterogeneous. Why? Because look at this, a reactant is what? Sulfur dioxide. What is the catalyst? Sulfur dioxide is a gas. Catalyst is what? Solid. So it is a heterogeneous. Even if you look at the Haber's process itself, right, we use a finely divided iron as a catalyst. And you see here, what are the reactants? Nitrogen, hydrogen, both are in the gaseous state, whereas the catalyst is in the solid state. So we look at the oxidation of ammonia into nitric oxide. So this happens in the manufacture of nitric acid. So look at this. Here the reactants are what? Both are gases. What is the catalyst state? It is in the solid state. So the Ostwald process, right, for the manufacture of nitric acid, we'll study in detail about this when we go to the P block. So here we'll use the platinum gauge as a catalyst. So here the point is they are in different physical states. That's why it is also example of the heterogeneous catalysis. Even you take the, so we can have so many examples, because at the end of the day we will study a lot of reactions, right, in organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry. We can pick up this one, is look at it. What is this? This is an example from the organic chemistry. Hydrogenation of the vegetable oils. Hydrogenation means this is gas. Vegetable oil is liquid. So we will usually use a nickel or a platinum or a palladium as a catalyst. So you see here, one reactant is liquid, which is the oil. Other reactant is gas, which is the hydrogen gas. And what about the catalyst? Catalyst is in the solid state. So this is also one classic example for what? Heterogeneous catalysis. Okay, so this is how we can classify the catalysis into homogeneous, heterogeneous. But our focus is what? The heterogeneous. So how do we explain the heterogeneous catalysis? So this is the thing. There are two theories that we will first look at it, then we will see what is the so-called modern theory. The adsorption theory, or which is called as the old theory, right, is based on a simple idea. So we have, just think about it, we have the catalyst surface. When the reactant particles, imagine the reactant particles are in the gas phase. We know, based on our chemical kinetics understanding, right, the rate of the reaction will depend upon the concentration of particles. When all the reactants are in the gas phase, the concentration will be, it will have its own normal value, whatever it is. But when these reactant particles are coming and they are getting adsorbed onto the surface of the solid, right, you see here what happens? On the surface of the solid, the concentration of reactants will increase. Okay, so look at it. So when you have the reactants in the gaseous state or solution and are adsorbed on the surface of a solid catalyst, right, what happens? This will increase the concentration of the reactants on the surface. And what do we study in chemical kinetics? The rate of the reaction will depend upon concentration, right? So while the concentration may be lower in the gaseous state or the solution, when we look at what is the concentration of particles on the surface of the solid, right, it is getting increased. And this is how the old theory or the adsorption theory talks about. There is one more theory that we have seen in our chemical kinetics, that is the intermediate compound formation. What is that? So this we have covered extensively in our chemical kinetics, but I'll just give you a quick idea. So what is the intermediate compound formation? When we use a catalyst, the reaction will proceed through a different mechanism. So if, say for example, we have a normal reaction path like this. This is the normal intermediate stage. When we use a catalyst, we will go through a path which will be requiring a lesser activation energy. So this is the intermediate with catalyst. So we'll go through a path that is requiring what? Less activation. So that is how the catalyst will be able to speed up the rate of the reaction. So this is the intermediate compound formation theory that we have seen in the chemical kinetics. Okay. Now what is this modern theory? Modern theory is kind of a merging of both these things. The modern adsorption theory, which is what we also call as the modern theory of explaining the heterogeneous catalysis, is a combination of the intermediate compound and the adsorption theory. So this theory will be explained in 5 steps totally. First step is, look at this, diffusion of the reactant onto the surface of the catalyst. Means what? The reactant particles are coming and they are diffusing towards surface of the catalyst. Second is, they are adsorbing onto the surface of the catalyst. First they will come to the surface, then they will be getting adsorbed. Third step is occurrence of a chemical reaction on the surface of catalyst, where the reaction will happen on the surface of catalyst through the formation of the intermediate. So see here, I'll just take you to first step is what? This is the first step. The reactant molecules are approaching. Then this is second step, they are getting adsorbed onto the surface of the catalyst. So here we will see there is an intermediate. This is the third step. Okay. Now once the reaction has happened, then the desorption of the product. The product molecules, right, they would get detached from the surface of the catalyst. So when they get detached means what? The surface of the catalyst is now available for another set of reactant molecules to come. So what is the fourth step? The product, they will get detached from the surface of the catalyst, and once they get detached, they will have to diffuse away. So the products, right, they will diffuse away from the catalyst surface. Now the thing is, when we look at how the reaction can happen, this can be a question. So when we have the reactant particles that are adsorbed onto the surface of the catalyst, right, we'll have a doubt. Let's say how we can have the reaction happening still. Let us say we have the molecules of A and molecules of B that are coming and that are getting adsorbed onto the surface of the catalyst. We see here when you have the adjacent molecules, right, there is always a chance for the molecules which are adsorbed side by side, they will be able to react, and when they react, right, that can lead to the formation of the new molecules or products. So when they are absorbed, it will be a question like how the reaction can happen. So when these molecules are absorbed, right, they can react sidewise with the adjacent molecules, and that can lead to the formation of the products. Okay, so this is how the modern theory of heterogeneous catalysis, right, it is able to kind of explain a lot of observations with regard to the working of the catalyst. Because remember, the beauty of this theory is that this theory can wonderfully explain why nothing is happening to the catalyst. You see here, the reactant is coming, getting adsorbed, then the products are leaving and they're diffusing out. So the catalyst will remain unchanged in mass as well as chemical composition. At the end of the reaction, right, it will just remain unchanged as if nothing is happening to it. But there are two things that we have talked. We can have substances that will enhance the rate or the activity of the catalyst. We call them as what? Promoters. And there are substances which will reduce the activity of catalyst. We call them as what? Poisons. Remember, we have taken the classic example of the Haber's process. Molybdenum will be used as a promoter. Carbon monoxide there can act as a poison. But this theory, right, so maybe you can just make a note of it. See, sometimes in maybe exam like NEET, we might have questions asked along these lines, like the modern catalysis theory, it cannot explain what? It cannot explain the promoters and the poison role. Okay, so these two the theory cannot explain. Okay, so this is about the now there are two important features of the catalytic activity. One is what we call as the activity of the catalyst, and second one is the selectivity. So what do we mean by the activity? Like we said for the a particular reaction of hydrogenation of oils, we can use either platinum or palladium or nickel. Now if you look at it, right, these elements, of course, they are all belonging to the D block, but instead of nickel, platinum or palladium, if we are using iron, what would have happened? Maybe the reaction would be enhanced, or the rate of the reaction would be enhanced, but not to that extent. So when you look at the activity of a catalyst, activity basically means how much the catalyst is able to enhance the rate of the reaction. It will depend upon the strength of the chemisorption. Means, look at it. So we have the catalyst. Catalyst has to adsorb the reactant molecules. The reactant molecules should come and get adsorbed onto the surface of the catalyst, and they should get adsorbed reasonably to a strong extent to become activated and for the reaction to proceed. So if they are either weakly adsorbed or they are adsorbed very strongly means what happens? These particles, right, they will be immobilized, they cannot move, and if they cannot move means, one, the reaction rate might get affected. Second is, they are so strongly adsorbed means they will not be able to leave, which means there is no space available for the other molecules to come and settle on the surface of the catalyst. So which means for catalytic activity to happen at a good rate, we should have the reactant molecules getting adsorbed onto the surface of the catalyst to a reasonably good extent. It should not be too weak chemical adsorption, it should not be too strong also. Generally, if you look at it, right, talking about the hydrogenation reaction itself, we will see that the catalytic activity will be increasing from group 5 to group 11. So where are these group 5 to group 11? So group 3 to group 12 is what? These are all the D block groups. And we may see in most of the cases, right, the activity will be picking up at around group 7 to 9, depending upon, because hydrogenation is not just one reaction. We have different types of hydrogenation also. We have hydrogenation of alkenes, we have hydrogenation of alkynes, we have hydrogenation of oils. So there can be different types of the hydrogenation, but the point is this: the activity of a catalyst will not be same, it will vary. So depending upon which catalyst is able to give us a better activity, we will choose that. Now the other aspect of the catalysis is the selectivity. Selectivity means it is basically the ability of a catalyst to direct the reaction for yielding a particular product. Now we have of course examples of the catalyst that will show selective behavior, but after this we will go and study about enzymes, which we also call as biocatalysts. So enzymes, right, they are the extreme example of selectivity. Like look at this now. So if you are having carbon monoxide reacting with hydrogen, in presence of nickel we will get mixture of methane and water vapor. In presence of copper with zinc oxide and chromium oxide we will get methanol. In the presence of copper only we will get what? If you heat it over copper, so in fact you will study these reactions in organic chemistry. Okay, we will get formaldehyde. So what we see is that depending upon what is the catalyst used, we are able to get a different type of product. It basically means what? We can use copper as a catalyst only in this particular case. We cannot use copper as a catalyst in other cases. So the selective nature of the catalyst means what? A given substance will be able to act as a catalyst only in a particular reaction. It cannot be used for all the reactions. Okay, so this is about the selectivity, and the extreme case of this will be seen in the enzymes. They will be highly selective, at least here, right? What are we saying? For broadly most of the hydrogenation reactions, right? For the broad category of hydrogenation, we can use either platinum or a palladium or a nickel as a catalyst. The activity might vary a little bit different, but we can broadly use them. But when we go to enzymes, right, we will see that a particular enzyme will be only used as a catalyst in one particular phenomena. Why that happens, we will be able to understand once we know the mechanism of the enzyme activity. Now there is another important example of catalysis that is shown by a class of catalyst which we call as shape selective catalysts. Zeolites are basically one good example for that. The reactions that are shown by the zeolites, they depend upon the shape and size of the reactant as well as product molecules and the pores and cavities in zeolite. So if you look at zeolite, right, they'll have this honeycomb like structure. They'll have these micropores. So zeolites are basically, I mean, for three-dimensional network of aluminosilicate, if you look at the pores, these pores will have a specific shape and size, and depending upon the shape and size of the reactant that is adhering to it, as well as the product that will adhere to the shape and size of the zeolite pores, we will see that those reactions will be selectively enhanced. So that's why we call it as a shape selective catalysis. Now lot of zeolites can be prepared synthetically, like one of the very example is this ZSM5, zeolite Soconi Mobile 5. This is used as a catalyst in the petroleum industry. So it will be able to directly convert alcohol into gasoline. So it's a method to prepare the synthetic petrol. So alcohols, when they are dehydrated, we will be able to get synthetic petrol. And zeolites broadly, right, we can see them to be used in cracking of the hydrocarbons, isomerization. But the point is, it will be shape selective. The size and shape of the reactant as well as the product. So whatever will be able to adhere to the pore sizes of zeolite structure, right, those reactions will be selectively enhanced. So this is about the shape selective catalysis. Now we mentioned about the word enzymes when we want to pick up the idea of selectivity, the extreme example of selectivity. So what are enzymes? These are basically a type of proteins. So proteins with a high molecular mass, they will form colloidal solution, and the enzymes will be able to catalyze numerous reactions, mostly the reactions that will happen in living organisms, whether it is human beings or animals. Since they happen inside the biological systems, right, we also call them as biocatalysts. And the phenomena we can call it as what? Biocatalysis. The first enzyme to be synthesized in the laboratory, right, that has happened in 1969, that is ribonuclease. So what are these enzymes that we can think of? So for the inversion of the cane sugar, so to produce glucose and fructose, right, invertase is the enzyme that is used. For the conversion of glucose into ethyl alcohol, zymase will be able to convert glucose into ethyl alcohol. For the conversion of starch into maltose, see, all these can be possible questions, especially JEE mains level or NEET level, right? We can even get some straight questions. See, bio guys might have these covered already in some of the topics for you in biology, but the JEE guys, you have to be careful because all these questions can be asked in JEE mains also. So for the conversion of starch into maltose, right, the enzyme that will play a role here is diastase. Diastase will be able to convert starch into maltose. Looking at the other enzymes, so for the conversion of maltose into glucose, so we have the enzyme maltase. So maltase will be able to convert the maltose into glucose. See here, the thing is, we will have to be focusing on remembering these names, because at times even JEE mains or NEET level, we can get straight questions based on the names itself. Urease, right, that will facilitate the decomposition of urea. What is the formula for urea? NH2CO, NH2. Urea will be decomposed into ammonia and carbon dioxide gas. Similarly, when we talk about the digestion of proteins, right, what are proteins? These are long order peptide chains. So proteins in stomach, they will be digested by pepsin enzyme that will convert it into the peptide chains, and even to some extent the amino acids also. But whereas when it comes to the intestine, trypsin will be acting as the enzyme. So trypsin will be converting proteins, or so converting the breaking down the proteins into even to the level of amino acids. Now when we talk about the conversion of milk into curd, the enzyme that will play a role here is lactobacilli enzyme. So lactobacilli enzyme will be able to convert the milk into curd. Just to summarize the important enzymes, so we have invertase and zymase, both are obtained from the yeast. Invertase will convert the sucrose into glucose and fructose. Zymase will convert glucose into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Diastase will obtain from malt, will convert starch into maltose. Maltase obtained from yeast, again it will convert maltose to glucose. Urease, right, that will break down the urea into ammonia and carbon dioxide, is obtained from soybean. Now when we talk about the enzyme catalysis, we have been saying that there is some specialty about the enzyme catalysis. So one is its highly specific nature, which we will understand as we go into the mechanism of the enzyme catalysis. But let us look at what are the important characteristics of the enzyme catalysis. It is most highly efficient. Why? Because normally when you talk about the solid catalyst, we will have only the solid catalyst atoms on the surface of the solid playing the role of a catalyst. Whereas when you look at the enzyme catalysis, the colloid particles. So what is a colloid particle? We will come to know about it as we go into the next section. So in a way, what we can see is each and every molecule of the enzyme could be playing the role of a catalyst. So which means we'll have more number of reactant molecules that can undergo the reaction. So even one single molecule of enzyme, right, can potentially transform 1 million molecules of the reactant per minute. So that's the order of activity that the enzymes can show. So it's very highly effective or efficient. Not only that, if you look at the enzyme activity, we are saying it's very specific in nature. Like, so for example, we use urea, right? We can break down urea into carbon dioxide and ammonia, but you cannot use urease in other cases. So the enzyme activity is very, very specific. Now when you look at the enzyme activity, the rate of enzyme activity will depend upon the conditions of temperature, and what is generally observed is at certain temperature the activity becomes maximum, and that's what we will be calling as the optimum temperature. So optimum temperature range is generally, for most of these enzymes, it will be 298 to 310 Kelvin. Because the human body temperature is 310 Kelvin, right? It's well suited for the enzyme catalyzed reactions. Now one is about the temperature, second is about the pH value. So when you look at the enzyme catalyzed reactions, the rate of the reactions will become maximum at a particular value of pH. That's what we call as the optimum pH. So generally the optimum pH is 5 to 7. So if you are a bio student, you will know that different body fluids, the saliva or gastric juices or the bile juice, they'll have different those who are not having bio, don't worry too much about what all these things are, but they'll have different pH values so that they can perform at optimal level. Now in catalyst, right, we use the word promoter and then poison. So promoter will enhance the activity of the catalyst, poison will actually inhibit or reduce the activity of the catalyst. So here also we will have activators and coenzymes. So the activity of the enzyme rate is increased by these two type of substances. One is what we call as activator, second is coenzyme. So what is a coenzyme? Coenzyme is nothing but it's a non-protein, typically vitamin. So when they are present along with the enzyme, that will increase the activity of the enzyme. Activators are basically ions, whether it is sodium ion, manganese ion, cobalt ion. So the ions, when they are weakly bonded to the enzyme molecule, they will be able to enhance the activity of the enzyme. Like, if you look at the amylase is present in saliva, digestive enzyme. Okay, so the amylase, when it is in the presence of sodium ions, sodium chloride or sodium ions, right, we will see that the catalytic activity will be enhanced. So this is about the presence of activators and coenzymes. Now just like there we have poison, right, here the activity of the enzyme is reduced or even sometimes completely curtailed by the inhibitors and poisons. Okay, so the inhibitor and poison, right, they will interact with the active functional group of the enzyme surface. So when we go to the enzyme activity or enzyme mechanism, right, we will see that on the surface of the enzyme we will have active functional groups, and the inhibitors or poisons, what they would do is they will interact with the interact means they will kind of bond themselves to the active functional groups on the surface of the enzyme, and that will lead to either reduced enzyme activity, or sometimes it can even completely destroy the enzyme activity itself. Now this idea, right, is even used in the drug industry. Like the very working of certain drugs, right, is based on this enzyme inhibition in a good way. So they will inhibit the activity of the enzymes that will otherwise lead to some unwanted reactions from happening. So this is about the characteristics of the enzyme catalysis. Now we've been talking about the mechanism of the enzyme catalysis, right? So this is what is the mechanism. When you look at any enzyme molecule, we'll have number of cavities present on the surface of the colloidal particles of the enzyme. So what is a colloidal particle? So usually these are large size molecules, which we also call them as macromolecules. Either you will have a single molecule as a colloidal particle, or you have a group of molecules. This is what we can see. Okay, so now when the enzyme surface is looked at, so we will see that the surface will have active functional groups. So what are the active functional groups? We have amino group, or we have a carboxylic group, or we have a SH group, or we have OH group. So the cavities on the surface of the colloidal particles of enzyme, they would have the functional groups, and also they will be having what we see as the characteristic shape, and this characteristic shape, right, will only allow a reagent or a reactant with a complementary shape. So you can see here clearly, this is the enzyme. Now the reactant or the substrate with a complementary shape only can come and lock. So the molecules of the reactant which have a complementary shape, they will fit into the cavities, just like, you know, the key is fitting into the lock. Because there is a presence of the active groups like, you know, NH2, COH, SH, an activated complex will be formed. So once the locking is happening, then we will see that there will be an enzyme substrate activated complex that is formed, and this will decompose to yield the products. So you can see the products will come out of the enzyme. Once the products are formed, they will come out of the enzyme, because the product no more has the complementary shape. So this is how the enzyme activity is typically looked at. Now to just put this in steps, the first step is the binding of enzyme to the substrate. That is possible because of the complementary shape, and then that is leading to the formation of the complex, enzyme substrate complex. Now once the decomposition of the activated complex is happening, that is leading to what? The formation of the product. So this is what is the mechanism of the enzyme activity. So that is the reason why the enzyme activity is very selective, is because only a particular molecule of protein, because what is enzyme? Basically it's a protein molecule, right, will act as a enzyme for the reactant with a complementary shape. For all the other reactant molecules, it will not be able to act as an enzyme. So that's the reason why we have been saying that it is a very selective process. Now looking at some of the industrial applications of the catalysis, so here we are just looking at 3 that are given in the NCERT book, but like most of the industrial process, we do use catalysts. Haber's process, right, to manufacture ammonia, we use finely divided iron as a catalyst, and molybdenum is used as a promoter. Ostwald process, we have seen the platinum is used as a catalyst. So for the conversion of ammonia into nitric oxide. In the contact process for the manufacture of sulfuric acid, to convert sulfur dioxide into sulfur trioxide, we use either platinized asbestos or vanadium pentoxide, either of them. Okay, so this is about the use of catalysts in the industrial process. Now we look at some in-text questions, and we'll wind up the part 2. Why is it necessary to remove carbon monoxide where ammonia is obtained in the Haber's process. I think we have already discussed about it. In the Haber's process, while iron is used as a catalyst, if there is any carbon monoxide, it will act as a poison. It will inhibit the activity of the iron. So we use molybdenum as a promoter, but carbon monoxide will act as an poison. So we should remove it. Okay. Look at the next one. Why is the ester hydrolysis slow in the beginning and becomes faster after some time? I think this also we have touched upon. Ester hydrolysis. If you look at any ester, CH3COO, any ester hydrolysis we take, so that is catalyzed by the H plus ions coming from the acid, typically hydrochloric acid. Now, one of the product of the ester hydrolysis will be an acid itself. Like in this case, if you are performing the ester hydrolysis, right, here what we will get, we will be getting CH3COH as the acid. Now, this acid will be able to give H plus ions. So, the product of the ester hydrolysis will have an acid formed, and that acid will in turn be able to contribute H plus, because the reaction is catalyzed by what? H plus ions, right? So because the product is also going to give us H plus ions, after some time what we will see, the reaction is going to become faster. Look at 5.6. What is the role of desorption in the process of catalysis? Now this we can answer by using the modern theory of catalysis. So what is the modern theory of catalysis? We have 5 steps. Remember how many steps are there in the modern theory? We have 5 steps. First step is what? The diffusion of reactants to the catalyst surface. Second step is what? Adsorption. Third step is what? Formation of intermediate and leading to products formation. Fourth step is desorption of products. Fifth step is once they are removed from the surface, they will diffuse away. That is the fifth step. Fifth is what? The diffusion of products away from the catalyst. Now the question is, they are asking what is the importance of the desorption. See, if the desorption is not there, then yes, the product is formed, but if it is sticking onto the surface of the catalyst, right, then the catalyst cannot be used. It's only like one round, that's it. You cannot use it, right? So the desorption should be there so that the product formed will be coming out of the catalyst surface, and the catalyst surface is now available for the other reactant molecules to come and get adsorbed. So that is the role of the desorption in the catalysis process. Okay, so this is the part 2 where we discussed about the catalysis. In part 3, right, we will talk about the colloids. Okay, we will see in the next part.